Take a moment and silence your cell phones, and please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we don't have any proclamations tonight, so we'll begin with the consent agenda. Are there any questions regarding the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion?
Move to approve the consent agenda as on the agenda.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there anyone wishing to comment on any item on the consent agenda? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have one presentation tonight, and Ken is here, Ken Putnam, to talk to us about the I-26 connector update. I have like this vision of us in 10 years. And now Ken will present, no, I'm just kidding. Hopefully not.
Okay, my name is Ken Putnam. I'm the Transportation Department Director. And the update I want to concentrate on today is with our consultant team that we hired. Sam Swartz Consulting, LLC, you gave us permission to negotiate a contract with them, and we signed that contract in October. And then on October the 12th, they came down from Chicago and had a kickoff and stakeholders meeting on that date. And during that day, we had 3 separate meetings. The first meeting involved city staff, and the second meeting involved the NCDOT, and then the third involved various stakeholders. And the NCDOT was gracious enough to come up from Raleigh that day and brought their entire design team so that our consultant could meet all of them face to face, because now they've been interacting through phone conversations and emails. The various stakeholders that we involved that day included the Asheville Design Center, the Asheville Housing Authority, and then specifically regarding the Hillcrest community, the Burton Street community, the Montford community, and East-West Asheville Neighborhood Association. And during that time frame, it was over a span of several hours, and each group came in and had dedicated 30 minutes of time to talk to the design team face-to-face to give them an idea of what some of their concerns were. So as they began working for us, they would have a good idea of some of the things they needed to look out for. There's 4 basic things that we are tasking the design team to do for us. First one is looking at things from an urban design perspective and any surplus property redevelopment opportunities that we can work with the DOT to kind of set in motion so that one day when this project is constructed and done, that there would be opportunities for us to go in and redevelop some areas. There will be another item would be to review some of the transportation designs that have been going on to make sure that they are what the city would like to see. Greenways planning. And then the last one is the aesthetics betterments concepts. Now, so far, most of you have been hearing about this list that we've been creating that we're calling the betterments. And those are items that we may have to pay 100% of that item. We may have to pay a partial part of that, or we may not have to pay anything for it. So like the sidewalks, the bike lanes, those kind of pedestrian amenities, those are the things we're talking about there. But there's a whole nother aspect that we will be looking at, and that's purely from aesthetics. So if you're familiar with the noise wall that's out on I-40 towards Inca Candler, and they've got the leaves on it and the mountains in the wall itself, if that's something that we desire, then we would have a committee that would help put that together. So one day, you all are going to see a large list of things that we would like to do, and I would like to stand up here and tell you that we got money for all of them, but chances are we won't, so you'll have to pick and choose on that. But we're going to have this consultant team to help lead us through that process, and that will be coming up probably in the next 2 to 3 months. We'll be getting going on that. And with that, I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Can I just add, you may have said this, but we've seen at least some initial results of the thinking of the Schwartz team, and I think where the I-26, where the city's I-26 team kind of is coming out is that Patton Avenue, reclaiming that Patton Avenue corridor is the priority for the city. Reclaiming it for development is the key priority. And the current design of the project doesn't really allow for that to happen in the way that we would like to see. And so the Schwartz folks heard that and went back and came back with some really good ideas about how to reclaim much more of that corridor by changing some of DOT's ramps and intersections and things like that. And those are the conversations that are happening now, but directly between Schwartz and DOT. But I think we were all very heartened and hopeful about what they came back with, that there could be a possibility to make it all better.
And I will be having a conference call later in the week that I'll get a better update on how that's going and some of the other things that we may have to do on that. The DOT has been real good to share everything that they have with our team, and they've been very cooperative in trying to help them understand it. So I think we're off on a good foot so far.
Okay, any other questions? No.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our presentations and reports. We have several public hearing items for tonight. The first is a public hearing to consider the conditional zoning of 153 Smoky Park Highway from Highway Business District conditional zoning to Commercial Expansion District conditional zoning for the expansion of a multi-tenant commercial development for Ingalls Marketing. And Jessica Bernstein is going to talk to us about this project.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, members of the public. As was stated, this is a conditional zoning request from highway business to commercial, it's highway business conditional zone to commercial expansion for the renovation and redevelopment of an existing shopping center. So the exhibit map here gives you an idea of the project site. This is Smoky Park Highway, the project frontage. There's 3 parcels with a combined area of over 32 acres. The site, as you can see on the exhibit B map, is partially developed. It's the location of an Ingalls market currently, as well as a number of smaller retail and commercial buildings, and then a large area that is undeveloped. This is the State Employees Credit Union, here's Smoky Park Highway, Asheville School, this is Lowe's. The area, the project site was conditionally zoned back in 2011 for a large expansion of the development. But that was never completed, and so they're back to us today. And now we have the commercial expansion zoning district for projects of this size, and that's what they're under consideration for. Renovating and redeveloping, this is the existing Ingalls here. This is the footprint of the retail shops that will remain, and there's a number of other small buildings that will be removed. So here's the site plan. Smoky Park Highway down here. That's that existing strip that will remain, existing parking that will remain, and then everything else pretty much gets redeveloped. There's over 250,000 square feet of retail space overall. As you can see on the site plan, they've got some spaces that are designated especially for the Ingalls use. This future retail, it could be 1 or 2 larger tenants, could be smaller tenants. That final mix hasn't been decided. This is smaller tenants now. And then they've decided on 3 out parcels that would be developed at a later date under level 2 review, but would have to comply with the standards that are in the commercial expansion district. There are a lot of different standards, specific standards in this zoning district, and as you saw in the staff report, there's a number of those standards where the project complies, but also a number of conditions. Such a large site, and with that tenant mix not being identified at this time, the applicant submitted a grouping of conditions and worked closely with staff to get to a place where everyone was comfortable with what they were requesting. So vehicular access is from 2 driveways from Smoky Park Highway. Both of those would be signalized. They're under DOT control, and those signals have already been approved. The zoning district only allows for 1 driveway, so that additional driveway is a condition. And then this isn't, not a city street, but this driveway that provides access into Lowe's, there's a stub out from when the State Employees Credit Union was developed, and they'll have that internal access from that driveway as well. They've got a minimum of 620 surface parking spots that are proposed. That's another condition that's under the minimum that would be required. And also the location of some of the parking factors into their specialized conditions as well. There are access and mobility standards in this district. Similar, this is the first project that's come through with the commercial expansion, but similar with the lodging district and some of the other mixed-use expansion districts that you have seen have these requirements for a 10-foot sidewalk, and that's been provided. Bike lanes into the development has been provided. They've included a spot for a transit stop, even though transit doesn't reach quite this far west just yet, but that will be in place for when that happens. Landscaping and open space are required. That's been provided on the plans. They are requesting a condition related to landscaping and parking, and that has to do with one of the required, or eliminating some of the required medians that are in that internal parking area. They are required to have a property line buffer because of the residential zoning to the rear. They've increased the width of that buffer, so it's larger than would typically be required, and that was something that came out of those discussions back in 2011 when they worked on the proposal at that time. So they've kept that in, as well as a walking path from the neighborhood. That was something that they had talked with neighbors about back then and kept in with this design. The expansion district does have design and operational standards for the buildings, and so that also is noted in some of the conditions. They will be, the buildings that are proposed and those future out parcels will all comply with the fenestration requirements, but there's a standard for an operable entrance every 75 feet, and with larger single tenants, that can be problematic. They like to limit the number of entrances they have for security purposes. So in lieu of meeting that requirement for the operable entrance, the applicant seeking to get to the intent of it by providing some sort of pedestrian amenity every 75 feet if there are larger single tenants that don't want to have multiple entrance and exit points. So that has been written into here as well. I've brushed on a lot of the conditions. I know the Exhibit B1 list is fairly lengthy, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions about any of those conditions that you saw having to do with the parking, number of spaces, location of parking, landscaping, driveways, entrances. There's also a number of very specific signage conditions. That is because the sign code was not amended to include the expansion districts when we created those districts. So when we have a proposal that comes forward under one of these expansion districts, we look at the signage that's allowed in the zoning district that most closely matches what they're proposing. And so in this case, we start by looking at highway business zoning. What would a multi-tenant development be allowed, and then work with the applicant to come up with a customized or tailored plan to this development. So that's reflected on this proposal as well. And I know you had a lot of renderings that were submitted with the application, so you'd have a very clear understanding of what they're proposing. And like I said, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know that they would also be happy to answer any questions or talk give any more detail about any of this. The project was approved with conditions by the TRC in November. They held the required neighborhood meeting. The Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously supported this project at their meeting in December. And staff does recommend support of this request. City adopted plans and visions for the area do anticipate this type of commercial development along the corridor, and that they've included a lot of these multimodal and design elements that we've put into the commercial expansion district. I think it's going to greatly enhance that existing shopping center and the new uses that will come there. So the recommendation is for support. And that concludes my report. But as I said, I think several times, I'm happy to answer any questions about any of this. I know there's a great deal of information in the materials that you've been given.
Jessica, thanks. I've got a couple of questions. Did the tree commission look at the proposal to eliminate one landscaping strip? So my question is about the elimination of one landscaping strip and pedestrian pathway, although it actually sounds like it's two.
So they did not. With a conditional zone, they would be the body to do that for a level 1 or level 2 project, but when it's a conditional zoning,
Okay.
you all get that opportunity.
All right, so one of the justifications for that is the reduction in parking. Well, the
Right.
reduction in parking is only 14%, but it seems like they're asking for a 50% reduction in the number of pedestrian pathways and landscape strips, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So that may be a question better for the applicant, but.
They are, we talked about it, it came up at Planning and Zoning Commission, and some of the planning and zoning commissioners were trying to work with the applicant during the meeting to look at where there might be some areas to add an additional landscape strip. Part of the complication was that they really were trying to keep this existing corner as is, and so it sort of constrained some of the site. But yes, that is their request that they've put forward.
I would be happy to reduce the parking even more in favor of landscape and pedestrian strips, but that's just me.
Anyone else have any questions for Jessica? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Does the applicant want to speak? Yes. Okay. I sent that to you.
So, Madam Mayor, members of council, I'm Wyatt Stevens. I practice law at Robertson Stevens here in town, right around the corner. We appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight on behalf of Ingalls. With me tonight are a number of folks. We have the architect, we have the land planner, we have the guy that's responsible for all the leasing, and they're here to answer any specific questions you may have. But let me go right to Councilwoman Mayfield's question. You're correct. The zoning would call for, you see this one right here and this one here, would call for 4. It's my understanding, and Mr. Cox, the land planner, can explain this probably better than I can, it has to do with how customers navigate their parking lot, both on foot and in cars. When you shop at Ingalls, and you shop in these big parking lots, you park where you can find a spot, and they sort of walk through to get to where they want to go, and it just didn't make sense to have those 4 blocks there. It was going to create some odd traffic patterns. I mean, I think Ingalls is open to reconsidering that if it's really important to you, but a fair amount of thought went into that, and a fair amount of thought went into the whole plan, including the signage and other things. I will tell you, as I'll show you in a minute, the landscaping is considerably more, particularly on the back with the buffer, than is required. The landscaping budget for this project is over $350,000. So the site, most of you are pretty well oriented, but this is Asheville School over here. That's the existing Ingalls. That's an existing building that would stay. That's the State Employees Credit Union. All of these buildings would be removed under the plan. This building, this site, the original Ingalls was built in 1974. This particular building was constructed in 1995, so it's time to upgrade this building. As you can see, if you've been out there, you know what it looks like. Just a big open parking lot with no landscaping, and kind of the old style, 25-year-old vintage Ingalls building. There it is right there. What is proposed for that building is going to go from 53,000 square feet to 74,000 square feet, and it will look identical to the Inca store Ingalls. That's a photograph of the store that's just a couple of miles down the road. Just like that store, this will have the rock basing. It'll have all the same signage. That store had landscaping. Ours will as well. Here's a slightly different view. Now, a lot of thought over the last 25 years has gone into these Ingalls stores. As you know, if you go into one of these newer stores, you notice a number of things, like there's a lot of light in there. So planning has gone into the architectural design so that they gather the light and they gather the heat from the light, and they use that for energy purposes. They have a number of energy efficient features. This store would be approximately 64% energy reduction over an average store. So you take a store that was 53,000 square feet, you add 20,000 square feet, and it's actually more energy efficient. It's got a high reflective roofing membrane, LED lighting, it's got high efficiency HVAC and water heating equipment. They literally reclaim the heat from all the things in a grocery store that generate heat. They use that to heat the space when it's cold. And likewise, the refrigeration units, you can think about those, they reclaim some of the cold from that and use that for air conditioning. So this is a state-of-the-art store with a lot of thought that has gone into it. The current number of employees that store has is about 55 to 60. With the added square footage, you add a pharmacy, you add a Starbucks, you add an Asian restaurant, there will be between 275 to 300 employees in that store, 35% of whom will be full-time. All full-time employees at Ingalls are offered health insurance if they want it. So, you know, this is a significant improvement if you just focus on the Ingalls aspect of this project. But, as Jessica pointed out, it's a bigger site than that. And, I apologize, we got a fold here. This will give you some idea on this plan of what it will look like. There will be, of course, an iMarket gas station on the site. Some of those buildings that I showed you earlier will be removed. There will be a building here, and I can't announce the tenant, but you would recognize that tenant, much needed in that area. There'll be a Zips car wash here. And then these other sites have not yet been determined. State Employees Credit Union used to be here. That's one of those buildings that will be removed. And of course, they're here now, and they own that site. I mentioned the landscaping. Here's the landscaping plan. There's going to be nothing built back here. This is a pretty significant buffer between this facility and the neighborhood. There's an existing path apparently that leads back into the neighborhood, and we're going to improve that path, not pave it, but improve it so it's safer to walk on, so the neighbors can access the facility. When you see down here, there's an existing traffic light here, and we're going to improve the crosswalk. You know, folks, students and employees from Asheville School walk over to the store. The sidewalk along the frontage on Smoky Park is currently 4 feet in width. It'll go to 10 feet in width, except for the location where it crosses over the railroad tracks right here. There's just nothing we can do about that bridge. But within the development, and this shows it slightly better, there's all kinds of connectivity which the city wants and should want, so that folks can walk and ride their bike between and among all of these areas. You're not required to get in your car to go somewhere. So you've got crosswalks and things of that nature. There will be, the DOT has approved an additional traffic light here. They do not believe it's going to materially affect the traffic in that part of the roadway, but it's needed, and it'll make it safer. The signage will be just like you've seen at other Ingalls stores. As Jessica pointed out, the way the signage works in a project like this, it's a negotiated process. Obviously, Ingalls would like more signage. They would like bigger signs because it makes it easier to lease out this extra space. But the city understandably wants smaller signs, less garish signs, less glaring signs. And so that's a negotiated process. And what we came up with is in the packet. I can go through it if you want to discuss it, but I think very reasonable series of small standard signs that will work for Ingalls and they'll work for the proposed tenants. This will be the sign package for this entire facility. So there won't be a bunch of new signs coming in when we lease out space, because that doesn't work that way. You know, this is the commercial expansion district that this council or within the last 12 months approved. And under the highway business, we may not have even had to come here, but you've changed that. It's a large enough project that we're here, and we're asking for your approval. I would just, point out just a couple of statistics because I think they're worth mentioning. Ingalls is a good corporate citizen. We all shop at Ingalls. But you don't think about the fact that they have 4,500 employees in Buncombe County alone, 1,500 of whom live are from the city and work in the city. Last year, I was going to show you a video, but we don't have any audio visual today, but they did a little 2-minute clip to sort of show what they did to give back to the communities in which they serve. Last year, they donated 16 million pounds of food, supported 3,000 local farms and businesses. Those are businesses like Hickory Nut Gap Farms, Sunburst Trout Company. They don't have to sell their products, but they know that's important to the communities that we serve. They donated more than $1.5 million to local community events, raised over 1 million school supplies for over 3,000 local schools. Now, a lot of these are in other states, but their main footprint is North Carolina. I've represented them for 15 years, and they've got a lot of stores here. They serve not only this community, but all these little small communities, across western North Carolina. So we really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about this project.
Yeah, just really quick, Mr. Stevens, on this graphic right here, the 50 feet, the condition 7, the 50-foot wide property line buffer, that's that green space up the top?
That's probably better shown here, yes.
And that 50 feet's measuring which way? Is it sort of going top to bottom over there, or which?
John, you want to speak to that? This is John Cox. He's our land planner.
You just want me to identify where it is?
Right.
Yeah,
So when you say,
it begins here because this is where the residential properties began.
Right.
And we continue around all the way basically to the Lowe's property.
okay, and then there's at this point, I mean, there's no, if we were, under what you are proposing no development in that area, am I correct?
That's correct. Yeah, this is, a large portion of this is our open space, and we'll be,
So it's going to stay that way?
yeah, it'll
right?
stay that way forever. It'll have
Okay.
to, yeah.
Thank you.
But another question on that, but it's also not publicly accessible. No, I mean, it's still private property.
That's correct.
That's right, okay.
Any other questions?
I guess, I don't know, I'll just say, I mean, I do, I will always vote in favor of trees and people over asphalt and parking spaces. And it seems to me there is an opportunity for at least one additional pedestrian pathway from that first tenant up to the market in the same way that there is one from the second tenant up. And I realize me asking for that, I mean, I don't know what the staff thinks about, if that would require any reduction of parking, what the staff feels like would feel about that, or how you all would feel about that. I realize that probably also requires you to redesign your parking lot, but that I don't have any objection to the proposal, but if that parking lot is ever full, I will eat my hat. So I'm always, I would rather there be at least one more pedestrian pathway. So
Don't forget about the DMV.
it's.
Anything else?
No? Do you have any other speakers?
I don't.
Okay, I'm going
That's
to
it.
open the public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to comment on this item? Yes, please. So you have 3 minutes to comment. Watch the lights on the lectern. They will change colors as you get closer to the end, and the buzzer means stop, and please just give us your name.
Journey Pfifferling, West Asheville citizen, and I just wanted to say kudos about the more walking space, more access for public to walk across the green space. People of low income that don't have cars walk, and when that is open to them rather than, barbed wire or biting dogs or alarm systems, it's nice to be able to walk across without any worry. And if there is a space that is open and green, to me as a citizen, it's really appreciated that that's protected forever, as he said it would be. And then even better, if there are neighbors close by, they should be, my vote is with you to allow more walking access rather than more gates. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Or any other questions, comments, or a motion? Yes.
I move to recommend approval of the conditional zoning request for Ingalls Market, Inc. for the property located at 153 Smoky Park Highway from Highway Business Conditional Zone, HBCZ, to Commercial Expansion District Conditional Zone, and find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, and is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted plans in that, 1, the proposal supports the strategies found in the city's comprehensive plan on infill development in an area with existing infrastructure and multimodal transportation elements. 2, the project provides open space, a larger than required landscape buffer, and a safe pedestrian connections to residential and institutional uses in the vicinity. And 3, the proposal updates and expands an existing retail center following new guidelines that provide more focus on the design of the site and buildings with fenestration and building placement standards.
We have a second to that motion? Okay, we had a quiet second from Ryan over here. The only thing I would say is that I think the staff report has the motion from P&Z's because we're not recommending approval. We are moving to approve. So just that clarification.
I move to approve.
Okay, now, did we have a sidebar here? Are we good? Okay, all right, good, all right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay, just for the single reason I stated.
Yes, okay, all right. Thank you all. The next item on our public hearings agenda is a public hearing to rezone 655 Brevard Road from Office 1 conditional zoning to Office District, and from Office 1 conditional zoning to RS8 residential single-family high-density district. And I have Shannon talking about, there, why is up? Missed it. Well, you're done. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. This rezoning application is a little bit unique in that it seeks to essentially replace or undo a conditional zoning that was approved back in 2000. Back in 2000, these two parcels were one parcel, and the applicant at the time came before council to do what is the predecessor to our current conditional zoning, which was a conditional use rezoning. The purpose of that conditional use rezoning in 2000 was to allow for the adaptive reuse of the existing single-family structure that was on the property. And at the time, the property, and that rezoning was approved, and the property was not redeveloped, but the structure was reused and adapted for a small dental practice. That practice continued for many years, and then more recently, the property owners who were the original applicants sold that practice to a new dental practice, but subdivided the property in order to retain ownership of the northern parcel. It's tract 2. So the request that's before you here tonight is those two property owners collectively petitioning the city to rezone the southern portion, the tract 1, the larger portion that currently supports that dental practice, to office, which is the adjacent zoning designation, and for the northern parcel, tract 2, to be rezoned RS8, which is directly adjacent and the original zoning designation. The northern parcel, tract 2, is currently undeveloped. There are no specific development plans for it, so the RS8 zoning designation would support a single-family home, and the lot would be conforming for that. The dental practice will continue to operate as it has for many years under the office zoning designation, should council wish to support that. That concludes my introduction. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Does the applicant wish to speak? Thank you. All right, we'll open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone wishing to comment? Yeah, all
right. Journey Pfifferling. I live on Morningside Drive, which is off of Brevard Road. My comment is in regards to Brevard Road, which I know is under DOT, but I think it's relative. That road is very heavily traveled. There's a lot of potholes. There's a school zone. I walk and ride my bike up there. It's extremely dangerous. There have been deaths coming around the curve near Laurel Wood. And at one time, I was waiting at the bus stop and stood for 4 hours directing traffic. There's accidents over and over again. There's got to be some kind of warning sign, some kind of lighting to help with the traffic. And in regards to zoning and or rezoning, there is another parcel that is zoned commercial on Brevard Road, right behind my neighborhood. And we moved in there, and there's a forest there. And when we moved in there, the forest was basically the selling point. Now there's a concern that that particular parcel, not necessarily the one being discussed, I just feel it's relative, may be zoned commercial, and it could be sold and paved over, and if that's the case, it will definitely lower property values. So I'm just bringing up the relative perspectives. There's a lot of concerns about zoning and losing property value and safety in terms of heavy traffic there. Thank you for listening.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? All right, I will close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the rezoning request from office conditional use zone to office for tract 1, residential single family, high density, to tract 2, thereby assigning zoning designations that are more compatible with surrounding properties, and find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, and is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted plans in the following ways. The rezoning will, 1, support smart growth goals by assigning compatible zoning designations consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. 2, removes the ordinance attached to the property providing more flexibility for future growth and development. And 3, returns a portion of the property to the original zoning designation.
Second. All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. The third item on our public hearing agenda is to rezone an address at Deaver Street from RM8 Residential Multifamily Medium Density District to HR4 Haywood Road Traditional Zoning. And for the second time, right? Second time. We have David here.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council, members of the general public. My name is Dave Hazard, urban planner with the Planning and Urban Design Department. What we have before you today is a straight rezoning request for 9999 Deaver Street. The rezoning request is from RM8 medium density multifamily to HR4 traditional, which is a Haywood Road form code district. Just for orientation, the parcel is located here. The north-south section of Haywood Road is just to the east, and then just off this map, you can see on the vicinity map, the east-west section of Haywood Road is just below this parcel. Parcel is vacant right now. It is wooded. The address is off of Deaver Street. However, the parcel actually does not front on Deaver Street. Deaver Street is over here. Howard Street is above it to the north. It actually fronts on a relatively unimproved alley that reads and acts as a driveway to a single-family residence to the north of that site. One thing to note with this site, even though it really should not be considered in the rezoning request, this parcel is part of a level 2 phased project that was approved with conditions. That project is a mixed-use project, but it also includes 4 other parcels, the parcel directly to the east, the 2 parcels to the south, and then the parcel to the southwest. And if that project gets built and this moves forward, this parcel, the subject parcel, will have frontage on both the north-south section of Haywood Road and the east-west section of Haywood Road. Compatibility analysis, the RM8 multifamily residential district is generally intended for multifamily uses and single-family uses. The HR4 district is intended for smaller scale mixed uses, commercial, residential. One thing to note within the RM4 district, the new construction is limited to 3 stories. And within that district also is required a vegetative buffer when it is adjacent to residential districts. So in this case, to the north and to the west of this site would require a 20-foot vegetative buffer that can be reduced if a wall is built. It can be reduced down to 10 feet. The subject parcel is surrounded to the north and west by single-family residential homes that are zoned RM8. To the east is HR4. There's 3 existing single-family residences. If the approved Level 2 project moves forward, those residences are slated to be removed. And to the south of that site is a gravel lot used for parking right now. With that said, the considerations, as stated before, that this is adjacent to 2 other HR districts, 2 form-based districts, that a buffer will be required adjacent to the residential uses. And one thing to note also is the orientation of this lot and the orientation of the other existing residential lots. Most of the residential lots front on Howard Street, and it's a traditional neighborhood pattern, or Deaver Street, and it's a traditional neighborhood pattern. This is the only parcel that fronts off of that alley, so it would not disrupt the traditional neighborhood pattern that is in that area. Staff finds this reasonable and consistent with city-adopted plans and strategic goals for development in this area. This was before Planning and Zoning on January 3rd, and it was recommended for approval unanimously. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Questions? Okay. Does the applicant want to speak?
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm Suzanne Godsey with Sitework Studios, and I just have one graphic that I wanted to share with you that I think helps to support this rezoning request, and it is a comparison of the setbacks and development standards between RM8 and HR4.
And are you working with the applicant?
I am.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so in RM8 zoning, your front setbacks are 15 feet, which on the unnamed alley is being shown right here. Changing that to HR4, you would have a 5-foot setback off of the unnamed alley. For RM8, for side setback, you would have a 6-foot against this adjacent residentially zoned property. But changing it to HR4, it would be a 15-foot setback. In addition, there would be a 10 or a 20-foot buffer that would be required also for anything that would go on that piece of property. And then for the rear setback, for RM8, it's 15, same thing for HR4. There's open space required in HR4, and although the building height is 3 stories in HR4, it's only 5 feet higher than what's allowed in RM8. Approving this rezoning request will allow us to fully realize our Level 2 development plans for Beecham's Curve, and I would request your support for this rezoning. I'm here for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to open the public hearing on this item. Yes. If you'll just state your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Jim Frankfort. I'm a citizen and a resident in the neighborhood. I actually live on Howard and Deaver. I'm one house away from the corner of Deaver. And I guess my comments are mostly about the Level 2 plan. And my information comes from what I just heard and also from a news article in Citizen Times from earlier this month, where they talk about the Level 2 development, total of, I think, 1.3 acres, residential units from 20 to 50, mixed residential and commercial. And the address is Deaver, okay? And Deaver, that section of Deaver that's right there is a one car can go up Deaver. And Howard is about 1.5 cars. There's no sidewalks there, and the exit onto Haywood is pretty small. It's on a bend, and it's fairly dangerous. So my concerns for the level 2 are mostly parking, traffic, access, and also turnover within the level 2 project. From the parking standpoint, I have unconfirmed information that they're planning on street parking, which for Deaver and Howard makes absolutely no sense at all. Also, with respect to access, have heard that the entrance and exit is going to be through Deaver or Howard, and it's got frontage on 2 sides of Haywood. Why not come in and out of Haywood? That would be much safer for the population. There's a lot, as I said, there's a lot of small roads around there. Deaver and Howard are both very small. And with respect to turnover, I have nothing against Airbnb, but I don't know what the zoning restrictions are for Airbnb there. They cannot do, okay, then that one's off the table. So it's mostly parking, traffic, and access that are the concerns about that.
There is a picture of it right there. Do you mind, she mentioned that it fronts Haywood. Tell me about it.
I think that is the whole level 2.
Oh, you're talking about the large, not this lot.
Yeah, this one, no, this one, this is Haywood right here. And this
No, that's Howard.
I'm sorry,
That's
Howard.
Howard.
As I said, that's about a street car and a half wide, and this is basically 1 car. And if the level 2 entrance and exit is supposed to be along here and not Haywood, it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess for everybody who lives there, especially if there's inadequate parking. So I just ask that those things be taken into consideration with the level 2 project. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Yes. So it shows here where the access is.
Hi, I'm Patty Frankfurt. I am the spouse, but I had an additional question could the applicant actually clarify the access routes?
I was going to say,
Make
it's
it more
actually
clear?
on the digital agenda that noticed this meeting, there is a diagram showing the access.
On the note.
Does any one of the planners, do you have the site plan or something that'll show the access?
Because that's really critical, actually, with the whole complaint with this.
It's available,
If they
but-
could clarify parking and access, that's the main concerns that a lot of us have. Thank you.
This is the level 2 project known as Beecham's Curve. And as stated before, this really, if this project were not to move forward and that parcel were to get rezoned, it would be under all of the HR4 zoning district. So I felt it was pertinent to talk about this in the sense that it affects part of the rezoning request here. Let me orient myself. So Haywood Road is in this vicinity. This is the north-south section, east-west section. The access will be off of Haywood Road in this location, and then would be off of Haywood Road in this location. This is existing right now. I believe this is Al Bakery, Archetype Brewery, that area. So they have an access easement through that area, and then they're in discussion with the Transportation Department to maybe have an exit out on Deaver Street, and that's being worked out right now. It was approved with conditions, and that's one of the conditions is to work with Transportation, identify that exit there, and that may go away, and I don't know if the applicant is willing or wanting to talk about it, but your main access points will be on Haywood, north-south, and east-west.
Okay, thank you.
And can I just ask, can you just walk us through, I just maybe can't see it very well, but what is being developed? What does that site plan do? Where are the buildings? What
Sure.
are they?
It's a 2-phase site plan. Phase 1 is a mixed-use building.
You're out of range for us.
Sorry.
There you
There-
go.
oh, there you go.
That
In
helps a
this
lot.
area, that's phase 1 is there. Would you like to?
Yeah.
As part of a level 2, we are required to have a neighborhood meeting, and I believe that we had 3 people show up to our neighborhood meeting for us to review the project. So we did make our efforts with the city requirements to notify the neighborhood of the development.
But our Phase 1 is Building A and Building B, and these two buildings front on Haywood Road running north-south and Haywood Road running east-west. Phase 2 will be two 12-unit apartment complexes, and that will be in Building C and Building D right here. That is the extent of the development. We've got 2 locations for dumpsters. We're meeting all of the other conditions for zoning and landscaping. We have ample parking. We're actually parking for Building A and Building B underneath the structures to consolidate on the tight site. I mean, it is 1.3 acres. I think this is a really good infill project, and the rezoning would help enhance that.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Any other questions from council or motion?
I move to approve the zoning map amendment from RM8 Multifamily Medium Density District to HR4 Traditional District, and find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, and is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted plans in that, 1, opportunities for community scale development are enhanced, and 2, buffering requirements are in place to protect residential areas.
Second.
It's a tie for second. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any other questions? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right.
And just for the folks who spoke, it sounds like there's no parking going to be on those streets, and if they have concerns about the access, they should just talk to city staff. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Sounded like we got some clarification there. Yes. Okay, we are moving on to item D, a public hearing to consider the conditional zoning at 390 Airport Road from Highway Business District to lodging expansion / conditional zoning for the development of a lodging facility with 112 guest rooms. Sasha is here to talk to us about this item.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, members of the public. My name is Sasha Vertinsky. I'm an urban planner with Planning and Urban Design, and I'm here to review this conditional zoning request for a hotel at 390 Airport Road. This tract, just to orient you very quickly, is just south of McKenna Road, which is the road that leads into the large shopping center where Target is, and just to the west of this is where the Best Buy is. The zoning right there currently is highway business, so this is a request to lodging expansion conditional zone. Also to clarify, this is a part of a larger tract, which is 3.93 acres, and they are requesting conditional zoning of just a portion of that, 1.84 acres. On the remainder of that tract, which would stay highway business, is where the Olive Garden restaurant is currently. Let's see. It's a little bit easier to see there. So this would create a flag lot. The frontage at the front would be 80 feet, which is one of the conditions of this conditional zoning. So for access and parking, the hotel is, the proposal is complying with our standards as a part of our conditional zone and providing a 5-foot sidewalk that leads out to Airport Road. Along Airport Road, DOT has just created a new sidewalk along Airport Road, so this would connect to that. They're also providing a 4-foot bike lane / bike path that would also lead up to the hotel. They're also providing a pedestrian access to the Olive Garden, like a striped way, so that people have a safe way to go between the two properties. Landscaping, their landscaping is complying with our requirements. We have street buffer landscaping, parking lot landscaping, and open space as well. Yes, so I'll just keep going. As a part of this expansion zone, there's required fenestration on these designs, and the front facade is required to have 50% fenestration, which is basically windows. Sorry, I'm having problems with that. And so that is the illustration that they have provided for you. The conditions for this request were pretty general up until with that kind of that frontage being reduced was the only one. In the last few days, these conditions have been revised, and I believe you should all have had those at your places today. So some of those conditions that are being proposed is that the hotel would provide reasonable transportation, as like a shuttle to different locations for guests, bus passes for employees and maps, also some energy recommendations, some energy conditions with the with Duke Energy, and I'll let them discuss that a little bit more. Generally, from a zoning perspective, this proposal does seem to comply and fit into the surrounding environment. There are a number of hotels in the surrounding area. It's far away from any residential area, so that's not a problem. And generally, our comp plan that we are under now, the 2025 plan, did not really address this area because it was not in the city when that comp plan was written. So they are also, I should say, have agreed to provide a bus transit shelter at the bus station on Airport Road. And I think, and planning, so required reviews, which I didn't go over, this was heard by Technical Review and Planning and Zoning Commission on January 3rd. Planning and Zoning Commission heard this and recommended approval with 5-0 vote. So I think that completes my review. If you have any questions for me, I'm available.
Any questions of Sasha? We're going to hear from the applicant, but before she sits down. Okay, no, she's sitting down. All right. It's a very efficient evening for you.
It is.
You could have put it back to back.
Madam Mayor, members of council, it's nice to be back. Let me tell you a little bit about Windsor Autry, for those of you who don't know. They're based in Greenville, South Carolina. They've been around for 30 years. If you've heard that name, it's probably because you think about the residential subdivisions and developments that they've done around western North Carolina, including all around Fletcher, Henderson County, as well as Weaverville. They've built over 4,000 single-family homes in western North Carolina over that 30-year period of time. So they're known for that, but they're also known throughout the Southeast for other developments. You see this top image, that's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. That's a mixed-use development, includes condominium buildings as well as retail and office space. And you see in the bottom image, that is a Hampton Inn and Suites in Roanoke, Virginia that they built. They own about 12 hotels around the Southeast, including South Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, Florida. They're in it for the long term. They're not a developer that buys these things and flips them. In fact, some of the hotels they own, they've owned for more than 20 years. They have employees that get retention bonuses, employees that are incentivized to be involved in the community, and you will hear a little bit about that in just a moment from David Berger. David works for Hospitality America. Hospitality America is a sister company of Windsor Autry. It has been in existence almost as long as Windsor Autry, and they manage these hotels. And David will be able to speak to you about sort of how they handle, how they work with their employees, and what they do operationally to be as efficient as they can possibly be. So why this site and why another hotel? That's the question. So Sasha showed this a moment ago. This site has remained vacant for as long as I can remember. Ever since the Olive Garden was developed, I think the developer probably originally thought another restaurant would go in there. It's kind of an awkward site if you think about it. This is a Google Street View looking back into the project. That little office building has been there forever. And just to the left of there is the Olive Garden. And so I think they envisioned, that a restaurant would go in there. And a restaurant, if you turn this down, a restaurant probably will go in there. I would submit to you that this hotel project that I'm going to talk about in a moment is significantly better than a restaurant would be. For one thing, a restaurant would bring significantly more traffic than a hotel would bring. But as I'll explain to you, I think this is uniquely suited for the kind of project that my client wants to build. The home to suites, if you've had a chance to look into this, it's something that doesn't exist in this part of the county. as an extended stay hotel. I can't think of very many that we have around Buncombe County, but I know that we have none in South Buncombe, Northern Henderson. This is a picture of the home to suites at the Greenville Airport. Every single unit has a kitchenette. And so they are designed for travelers, particularly business travelers who want to stay for more than a couple of nights, and they don't want to have to go out and buy meals for all 3 meals. They have a little kitchen where they can fix food for themselves. When you go to Google Maps, and I had a young lady in our office prepare these maps for me, you see there are a bunch of hotels out there, but there are not very many quality hotels out there. You've got Super 8, Econo Lodge, you've got Comfort Inn, Clarion Inn. I think the Clarion Inn burned over the Christmas holidays. The hotels that this hotel would compete with include the Courtyard by Marriott, the Hampton Inn and Suites, that's owned by John Winkenwerder. It's a great project. It's been around since 1998, but John has reinvested and done a nice job with that project. And the Wingate Inn, and maybe the Fairfield. Well, my clients are in the business to make money, and so they wouldn't put a hotel in there if they didn't think it could make money. So they ran a report, and this is publicly available data, and they discovered that during the year 2016, when you include their peer hotels, the ones they would compete with, the ones I just mentioned, there are 5 of them, the occupancy rate for those hotels was 80% occupancy, 7 days a week. So there's massive demand for hotels in that part of the county. That is not being met by the existing hotels. This is a little hard to read, but we went in and we had somebody look at, Google Maps goes back to 1994. That's the Google Earth images. It goes back that far. And a number of these hotels existed in 1994. The Comfort Inn, the Clarion Inn, the Super 8, the Econo Lodge, and the Fairfield Inn. We don't actually know how old they are, but they're older than that. So you say, well, what's the target market? Well, the target market is not just tourists. If you think about that part of the county and you think about where we have manufacturing, we have it in the flat parts of western North Carolina. We have it in South Buncombe. We have it in Fletcher, in northern Henderson County. This was a simple Google. I Googled manufacturers and Fletcher, and this is what the map produced. That's where the hotel would be. You've got everything from Rafflatac to Old Castle to Cane Creek Cycling, a client of ours. You've got Borg Warner, any number of manufacturers out there. Eaton is not on this map, but Mr. Berger will talk to you in a minute about, they can also run a report on the corporate contracts that these large employers have with hotels. They have them with Hilton and Marriott. And when you run a report, Eaton alone had 4,000 hotel room stays in this area last year. And so the target market for this would be about $100 to $130 a night room. Folks that would come in and they would call on these manufacturers. They would work in these facilities for short periods of time. You think about mechanics that would come in. They don't want to stay in a Super 8. They want to stay in a nice, new, well-built hotel in a convenient location where they can walk to restaurants. They can get on the brand new sidewalk that the city built, and they can go up and then go down to Target. They can get groceries and bring them back to their hotel and fix them. This is exactly what we need when you talk about hotels for this location. The conditions, the additional conditions that we agreed to, we will provide commercially reasonable transportation for paying guests during reasonable hours to reasonable locations. You got to put that language in there because people will take advantage of it if you don't. What we're talking about there is a shuttle. We're talking about somebody that wants to go to Sierra Nevada Brewing. They want to go downtown. They want to get picked up at the airport. We'll have a shuttle for them. If for some reason 5 years from now, that's not how you do it, we'll do it some other way, but we will be bound by this rezoning to provide that kind of transportation for people. that's commercially reasonable. We will also provide bus passes and maps to go along with it for all paying guests and employees if they request. So, you're not going to get a bus pass when you show up and get your room key, but you will absolutely get a bus pass if you want one, and you want to go downtown. It doesn't cost Windsor-Altry but $1 each way, but it makes sense for the city, it makes sense for the environment, and it makes sense for the guests, and so we're going to do it. The 14th condition here is that the owner, operator, developer, and we wrote it that way because again, Hospitality America, they're the ones that they're going to operate it, but Windsor-Altry will develop it. We have committed to reach out to Duke Energy, the City of Asheville Water Department, the PSNC for gas, and find out, what is available in terms of, as we construct this building, what's available in terms of energy efficiency and renewable energy options that we could use in construction and that we could use in the operation. They've already committed. They're going to recycle whatever they can in terms of the construction materials. They will have recycling in the rooms. You'll hear in a moment from David Berger about all the really cool things that Hilton does. And this is a Hilton flagged hotel, one of 2 in the area. The Hampton Inn is the other one. And that's the final condition, that as long as the hotel is a Hilton brand, the hotel will participate in the energy and resource conservation initiatives offered by the Hilton. And you'll hear in a minute, it's actually pretty cool, some of the stuff they do. For example, you won't get plastic forks anymore, when you go get breakfast there. It's all china and it's flatware. Almost done. So we wouldn't be here except that you changed the ordinance and said no more hotels unless we get a chance to pass on them, and that's why we're here. I would submit to you that we absolutely comply with the ordinance that you enacted. Development standards are established to ensure the integration of the lodging use with the surrounding neighborhood and to minimize adverse impacts on adjacent land uses. This absolutely does that. We've received no opposition from anyone. In fact, I have letters, and hopefully you've received them by email, from all of the restaurants and stores in the area saying, yes, we want this. Yes, we need this. Yes, we need a new decent hotel in that area.
I'm sorry, were those submitted to all of us? I only got maybe 1 or 2.
I'd be happy to show them. I've got about 5 or 6.
Okay, about the support?
Yeah.
Buffalo Wild Wings.
I got that one.
Magnolia Property Group.
Didn't get that one.
Chili's. Culver's. So sorry, 5. I may have overstated it. But
okay.
No one has expressed any objection. I mean, I think that's accurate. And several for corporate reasons, they don't take a public stance in favor. But certainly our neighbors in the area are aware of what we're doing, and they support this project because it makes sense for them and it makes sense for the city. So I would, if you'll indulge me, Madam Mayor, for just 5 more minutes, I'd really like you to meet David Berger. He's a great guy. He's got a great story to tell. He's been with the company a really long time, I think ever since college, right, David? And if you could just...
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So I'm not an attorney, I'm not a developer, I'm not an urban planner, I'm an operator. And I think that's important because in 2.5 years from now, whenever the hotel opens, all those folks will be gone, and I'll still be part of the community, and so will the employees and managers at the hotel. So it's important that you have a face with that, and that's me. I started with Hospitality America in 2002 out of college. 16 years later, I'm a partner and vice president. So it's a great company. I just want to speak in facts, and the facts are, my job is to come into a market and say, will this work? And go around. Go to Chili's, go to Olive Garden, see who's staying in the hotels. And, this is public, but I did run this report, and I paid for it. And, this sub-market with 5 hotels in it is running almost 81% occupancy. If you know anything about the lodging business, Sunday nights are non-existent. So if you take out the Sunday nights, this sub-market is running about 84-85% occupancy. I only ran 5 hotels in this sub-market on this set, which was the Fairfield, the Wingate, the Courtyard, the Hampton, and the Comfort Inn. I didn't run the other hotels because honestly, nobody would pay attention to those hotels. Whoever is working your corporate sector in the city is doing a fabulous job. In 2016, the city of Asheville, through Hilton Hotels, has generated almost 35,000 room nights in corporate business. If you think Marriott and Hilton are the two main players, and I would tell you they are, if Marriott produced close to that, you're generating close to 80,000 room nights of corporate business in your city, which is tremendous. The truth is, people that travel want their reward stays. Unfortunately, they don't want reward stays from Comfort, Econo Lodge. They want them from Hilton and Marriott. As a developer, which I told you I am not, you wouldn't go into a market that's saturated. We wouldn't do that. The difference between your central business district and this submarket in rate is astounding. The second tier hotels in this submarket are selling rooms online for $60 and $70. This exit's not a truck stop. And this brand that we're delivering to this exit will be a mid-scale luxury brand. And look, we've developed 25, 30 hotels over the years. We do things the right way. We're part of the community. We have about 500 employees. Now, and I honestly do not know what your minimum wage is. Not one employee in our company makes less than $9 an hour. That's a mandate from ownership. We care about our people. I could come up here and grandstand all day and tell you who we are. You could do the research to see who we are. We're a reputable company that's been in business 30 years, started our journey in Johnson City, Tennessee in 1995 in a 77-room Hampton Inn. 5 managers started in 1995. We sold that hotel in 2015. The same 5 managers were in that building. Ownership wrote them all a check for $15,000 when we sold the hotel. We do things the right way. And this is really remarkable that your city, which is known as a tourist hub, is generating this kind of room nights from a corporate sector. And that's somewhere we want to be. That's what this brand is. This brand is an extended stay brand that caters to the corporate traveler. Hey, look, I hope on Friday and Saturday we fill that hotel up with all the tourists we can. But this is a corporate hotel. And that exit is really strong. And we'd like to be a part of it.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
I have our architect is here too if you have any questions about sustainability.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm glad I didn't get beeped.
There any further speakers? I'm going to open the public hearing.
No.
Okay. All right. I'm going to open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing on this item. Do I have questions, comments?
I have a comment. So we changed standards, so these types of developments have to come to us. And it's one of those things where I try to keep a very pragmatic view on voting for these sorts of things. I will point out, though, there's a great deal of Asheville citizens that do not want to see any more hotels. I'm just putting it out there. Keeping that in mind, though, it's one of these things where the area that this hotel is going to be, and I don't doubt for one moment that you have a good product, but the area where this is going to be, it's kind of like, okay, it's near the airport. It's on a busy corridor with nothing other than commercial businesses. It makes it very. If you can't put a hotel there, where can you actually put a hotel? It's almost in Henderson County. But I do want to say that this is not one of those situations. I'm going to support the project, but this is not one of those situations where don't act like you're giving the city of Asheville something, because there are tons of citizens that would gladly want me to say no to this tonight. And it makes it really tough when you really look from the business side of it to say, well, it's not inside the city corridor. It's almost on the in Henderson County, considering where Airport Road is at, and it's on a busy business corridor with a noisy airport and nothing but businesses. So I'm going to support your project. But I just thought I needed to say that because it's just one of those things tonight.
Thank you. Did you?
I just want to thank the applicant and your whole team for addressing some of the concerns that we discussed around energy and sustainability and transportation. I really appreciate adding those conditions. Thank you. And I'm happy to make a motion at the appropriate time.
I appreciate the presentation that you all made. I appreciate you all sitting down with us ahead of time. I'm opposed to this, and actually quite strongly opposed to this. Sasha, you actually helped me out with an understanding, is telling me that this part of town, that part of, wasn't part of Asheville, and as a result, wasn't part of the comprehensive plan. And if you look at the development, that's pretty clear. And it absolutely is. And what our role is tonight in City Council is to determine whether or not this proposal fits within, is compliant within the comprehensive plan. And I went back and looked at it, and one of the keys that we talk about in the comprehensive plan is a mixed-use land use pattern, or mixed-use developments and buildings should be encouraged. And if you look around that, and I respect Mr. Stevens for putting it up there are actually 9 hotels within a 1-mile radius of this proposed hotel. And I understand you view them differently. There is actually going to be another one going in that was approved before that's not yet been built, that's further up the road. And so what we're doing here is we are going to be approving, if we approve it tonight, 11 hotels in a 1-mile radius. And I don't think there's any other part of the city where that's occurring. And I realize that there's a comment made, if you can't put it here, you can't put it elsewhere. But where are you going to put it? Every part of the city, as it stands right now, needs to fall under compliance with the comprehensive plan. I have no doubt you all will be very successful if you build this. But the question for us is not whether or not you're going to be successful, it's whether or not this is good and rational and smart land use plan. What we hear a lot of is their housing. And I understand your view would be that probably a restaurant may come in there, and I understand that perspective, but we have a sidewalk that's going along there, and literally less than a half a mile up the road is an Aldi grocery store, the one that you mentioned. This is on a bus line. And if you go further up the road, there is actually a mobile home community up there. So there are residents who live along this corridor. And so again, my perspective here is in looking at the comprehensive plan and looking at this in good faith, I don't see how adding an 11th hotel within a 1-mile radius is in the public interest, is responsible development, or is compliant with the comprehensive plan.
I would just like to say, outside of land use, that I was struggling a little bit because when you showed the numbers, you all are banking, but you made a statement that a lot of your employees don't get paid a living wage. That kind of shook me just a little bit. And honestly, I am struggling with this tonight. I thought the location was great, but at this point, I am really thinking about what benefit it will be to the employees and the residents around. So I'm going to support it because I believe the location, because of the location, but there are some things that are very troubling to me because of the living wage.
Okay, go ahead, Julie, make your motion.
I move to approve the conditional zoning request for Highway Business District to Lodging Expansion Conditional Zone for the Airport Road Hotel project with the requested conditions, and find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, and is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted plans, in that, number 1, the project is located in a well-established commercial area, number 2, increases pedestrian connectivity, and 3, a new shelter will be built at an existing art stop on Airport Road.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Okay, did you get that? 5-2? Yes. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We have one item left on our public hearing agenda, and that is a public hearing to consider the conditional zoning of 1093 Tunnel Road and 318 Park Place from RS8 Residential Single-Family High-Density District and Highway Business District to Highway Business District conditional zoning for the development of a commercial use. Jessica is here again.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, council members, members of the public. As was stated, conditional zoning. You can see here on the Exhibit A map, the 2 parcels have a combined area of approximately .35 acres. This is a small site. Here's Tunnel Road. This is the Tunnel Road parcel. There was previously an unopened alley between these two parcels, and this is the residential parcel. This gives you, it's a little bit of an outdated aerial, but to let you know that that residential parcel is undeveloped. It has frontage along Otine Park Place and Pinecone Drive. And then the Tunnel Road parcel has those 3 frontages as well.
So the alley being closed brings those lot lines to the center?
Mhm.
Yeah.
The applicant owns both of these parcels, so when she petitioned council to close that alley, the line is split down the middle.
There's no gap in there.
And our mapping just hasn't quite caught up. So what the applicant is proposing is shown on the site plan, and it's actually, for the most part, existing out there if you went to the site on Tunnel Road. It's the location of Elf Auto Center. The applicant went through a level 1 development review process for this project to complete the plan almost as seen here. The use is the auto center. There are 2 driveways off of Tunnel Road. Those were existing previously, and they were approved to remain. So that is the vehicular access to the site with parking in front. And this is that previous alley behind. So the applicant went through this process, the level 1 review. As a part of that, she paid a fee in lieu. At that time, we allowed a fee in lieu to be paid instead of constructing the sidewalks along Otine Park Place and Pinecone Drive. She petitioned the Board of Adjustment successfully to receive setback variance for the building to be placed where it is. She went through our alternative compliance process with the Tree Commission successfully to deal with existing utilities along Tunnel Road where street trees in the street buffer could not be placed. And then so this is in place right now, operational business. The one outstanding item from her level 1 project approval that hasn't been constructed is the property line buffer. We have the requirement for that property line buffer in between commercial zoning and a residential parcel. As a part of the alternative compliance with the Tree Commission, they approved a reduced buffer from 30 feet wide to 15 feet wide. And with the alley closure, she would then have the area to place that landscape buffer within. However, now that the building and the business is open and operational, she's expressed difficulty with using the site, maneuvering tow trucks. She can explain the operation of the site very well. But what she'd like to do is be able to use the alley so that tow trucks can come and go from this space and into the back of the building where the bays are for those non-operational vehicles. It would be enlarging that vehicular use area behind the building and then shifting the location of the property line buffer. The UDO does not allow you to place your property line buffer for your commercial use on a residential parcel. So she could not do that by right. That is the nature of this conditional zoning request. She is proposing to rezone that residential parcel so that she can expand the commercial use slightly into that parcel and place that landscape buffer in that location. So that is the entire nature of this request. The conditions that were included in your staff report are basically keeping the site as it is under that level 1 approval, moving the landscape buffer to the rear. And then one thing that's different from the level 1 is that the plantings that were required that she received alternative compliance for the street tree and street buffer, well, they can't be placed up on Tunnel Road. They would be placed elsewhere on the site just to not lose that additional landscape material. However, we have got comprehensive plan policies, vision statements, and many adopted plans about the need to preserve and maintain residential uses, residential lots, parcels for residential development. So because this lot to the rear, because it is a vacant residentially zoned parcel, staff is unable to support this request. The applicant held her neighborhood meeting. I've spoken with members of the neighborhood. No one was opposed to it. They just had questions and expressed just the frustration about the congestion of Tunnel Road as is, not for this project. Was approved with conditions by the TRC in December. Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this request at their meeting in January, and so typically you get a recommendation from Planning and Zoning Commission. There wasn't really a recommendation. They voted, there was a motion made to support this request, feeling that the applicant was just trying to close out a development process, that the buffer on that previously residential lot would be an adequate buffer, and that motion essentially failed. It was 2-2. So a second motion was made to not support the request because of the city's planned policies to retain residential lots for residential uses, and that was, again, 2-2. So that's sort of a stalemate. There was no recommendation from Planning and Zoning Commission, but we included sort of what their discussion was so that you'd have that information. And that concludes my report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, so am I right in seeing that the alley, the proposed alley, it seems like there's a two-way driveway there, and is that 20 feet wide?
Well, there, you're talking about up there.
It's shown as 24 feet, which is the...
And that's the one that goes out into Pinecone?
It would go, yes.
Does that, I mean, that strikes me as a bit excessive.
That's a commercial use driveway width.
Is that's our minimum requirement?
It wouldn't be our minimum. I think that would be our maximum. Or maybe, I'm sorry. It's not an atypical commercial driveway width.
I guess the difference is it's on a small residential street as opposed to a street like Tunnel Road. So I don't know if there's if there are any options around making that smaller. I mean, it doesn't seem like there are 3 bays. It doesn't seem like you're going to have a bunch of tow trucks coming in and out of there 24/7, 365. So that was my only question.
Any other questions for Jessica?
In terms of where you guys are coming down on this, I mean, so from the staff perspective, it's really the issue about whether or not we're losing a residential piece of property. If it weren't that, you guys would probably be okay with it.
Yes,
I'm sort of trying to nail it because to be honest, I'm a little bit confused. This one I'm kind of torn with. I'm a little confused on and trying to get a sense of, from a development perspective, where you guys are falling down.
Whenever we receive requests from any sort of commercial uses that are along a corridor that's backed up by a single-family neighborhood, we refer to comp plan policies that talk about holding that line and not letting the commercial uses kind of encroach into the neighborhood. So that's our standard line that we try to hold as a department. Case-by-case basis, always, one size doesn't fit all, and that's why we have this process to kind of weigh the particulars.
Thank you.
Actually, one more question.
Sure.
Jessica, the memo mentions that there is an elevation difference between this residential lot and I guess the one next to it, going, I guess, up the hill. What is that? Is it 5 feet? Is it 10 feet? Is it 20 feet? What is the... how much of a separation is what I'm trying to get at?
I don't know that I have the exact detail. The engineer or the site designer is here. It's not one of the steepest changes, for sure, that we see in residential neighborhoods in Asheville.
Any other questions? Okay, does the applicant want to speak on this, or should we go ahead and open the public hearing?
Good evening. My name is Lillian DeGavi, and I'm the applicant and the owner of Elf Auto Service. It's just a husband-wife service. I have some handouts if... So we were 25 years located here in the downtown area, and we thought it was the best thing for us to get away from the breweries to just find another place, so we did. And this is it. This is it right there. It was an old car wash, and So that's what we did. On the handout that I just gave you guys, the first letter was way back in 2016 when I noticed that after all the problems of not being able to put the building up in front like we wanted, we were going to lose the back space that we needed to come in and out, to the shop. So what happened is that we went through all the process that Jessica just explained, and bottom line is that we're left with just 15 feet behind the alley. Then my residential lot starts right away. So the ordinance says for 30 feet between the residential and the commercial property. Well, we were able to get it approved to 15, but that means that my property line, let me get another picture here. Actually, I think it's still, well, I'm missing one. Oh, here it is. So this is a better view of the back situation. So this is the alley right here. This is the alley. So my property line is here. So that means that these trees need to be planted right outside the door here. Right there. Going through the process, of course, we went through a variance because we had a little setback on the side, and there was a few, the first few comments, I think they're very interesting because this is just a unique piece of land. Really, it's, so if I can read about the reviews that they did, it's the second page on your, the first page is actually a letter from my neighbor that he is in favor, and he got signatures of other people around, that they favor the fact of doing this project because it's going to enhance the lot, because, with a lot of trees and bushes. So that's the first page. The second page is that letter from, this letter was prepared by the zoning administrator to the Board of Adjustment back in February 4th, 16. At that time, I was requesting a side street setback variance in order to construct the new building. So the three first reviews on that letter is the current property is smaller in size to the surrounding commercial properties and to other similarly zoned properties. The property is surrounded by streets on three sides, which requires greater setbacks than traditional lots located on a corner. And the last one, the property has underground utilities with easements. There's a sewer line that's in front, along the front portion of the lot that prevents the applicant from placing the building closer to Tunnel Road, which was my initial idea when we were in the process of planning this. So like I explained, the buffer yard is going to start you can see that this is all mulch because actually there's nothing that can happen back here if we're not granted the conditional zoning. There's a boiler and compressor room here and the recycle center here, and we need to service this, so that's one of the predicaments here. So, but the main problem is that if, going back to the front lot, if you can see, it's not very big. And for us to have tow trucks coming in and out at times that customers are trying to come in, it's really difficult. So the tow truck basically, to deliver a car there, I don't know if you can see it, but it's sort of like an incline close to that truck there. So it's hard to push inside the cars in the shop from the front, and it takes all the I think it's a safety issue for me because if some customer's trying to come in when a tow truck when a car is being delivered, basically it stops the whole front of it. So that's pretty much what I have to say on that.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, good.
So the letter that's on top from Mr. Ray, is that his house that's closest to your building?
Well, he owns the house, but he
Okay.
doesn't live there. It's a rental.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a rental.
Ma'am, you had showed, can you put this one back up, just really quick over
Sure.
there? And could you just point to where, on that, where your property ends, your property line ends, so?
Okay, well, the commercial property or the residential? 'Cause I
Can you do
own-
both? Can you do both for us?
Okay, here you won't see it. I mean, right here where my finger is pretty much my, do you see the cone back here? There's
Right.
a cone. Somewhere in this area, because see, it's 15 feet out of the back, which
Right.
is basically the alley. When the alley ends, that's when my residential lot comes. If you
Okay.
look at the other, the residential goes all the way up here. My residential, can you
So
see my-
does it go past the trees? Like if you put it back over, so it goes
Yeah, the
past?
residential goes to the driveway of the neighbor up here.
Okay.
Right there. But the thing is that I've been approved for 15 feet, but with the conditional zoning, I can go with the 30, which is which is what I'm trying to do, is comply with the current ordinance that requires a 30 feet setback. And the trees are planted actually at 35 feet from the property line. If that becomes my property line, the commercial property line with the residential, I'm going to be about 30-plus feet away from that line.
So can you go back to the other one and just kind of point to, like, where, in terms of where you expect the paving to end?
Well,
If you're being asked to do this,
again,
where is that?
There's a cone right there. See?
Right.
So the plan would be to come in and shave in a little bit over here. And again, we're on an incline here, you can see.
Right.
So we're not, and the more you get to this area, it's going to be steeper. So the idea is to come in around this cone here till about the third bay here. So, which basically we're getting 15 feet from the alley and another 15 feet from the alley into here, which will bring us below this line of little bushes back here. We got the trees, and then we got the bushes, and then probably another 5 feet, and then we would come in, at least to get enough space so we can get a tow truck here, because the tow truck will have to come in the rear to deliver the car, and then here it's flatter, so we can push it into the shop.
And do you have a sense of where that ends to where the next property begins? Like how much of a buffer would that be between kind of?
30, it would be 30 feet.
It'd be 30 feet
The
between
30
that.
feet would be the buffer, the ordinance asked for 30 feet.
Okay.
I happen to be able to, we got it down to 15 feet, but it's not what we want. We want to go back to the 30 feet.
Okay.
And fill it up with more trees, just make it pretty.
Okay. Thank you.
Julie, you had a question?
No.
No, you're good. Did I miss any other questions? Anyone have? Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Yes.
Mayor, council members, my name is Carl Kuhn. I'm here to comment for two reasons. First, as a member of Asheville Planning and Zoning Commission, I was out of town in the meeting at which this project was heard. Had I been there, I would have voted in favor, and it would have come with a positive recommendation to council. Second, I'm an adjacent property owner and grew up in the Otine area, so I'm well familiar with this property and what was prior on the parcel. If we look at the motion that staff has provided you for denial, one of the comments is that the proposal results in a loss of vacant residential parcel. I think the operative word there is vacant. It is not removing any housing stock, but it is a vacant parcel. Second, it says it allows commercial use to encroach into a residential neighborhood. The parcels to both the east and the west are commercial properties, and they extend back further than what this current parcel does. Third, it says the proposal does not comply with the city standards on driveway separation, sidewalks, and landscaping. That's really a non-issue here, and that has already been addressed through the Board of Adjustment actions. If you look at the motion to approve, it says that it makes use of an existing commercial parcel with upgrades to site landscaping. This is a vast improvement over the dilapidated car wash that used to exist on the property, and this is a small local business. Second, the landscape buffer will provide an effective screen between the use and the neighborhood. And I think this increased buffer of 30 feet over this incline, I think there's about a 12-foot elevation difference, would be far superior to just a vacant residential lot that is currently grass. So I urge you to approve this conditional rezoning. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item?
Hello, members of the council. My name is John Court. I've been a resident of the city of Asheville for 70 years. I've been a licensed architect for 45 years. And I served on the Planning and Zoning Board for 10 years. And thank you, sir, for your astute comments. I would say that this plan is 100% in compliance with the long-range plan. And it was called the 2010 plan. If you look at the last page on your handout, you will see that the 2010 plan envisioned the area at Riceville Road and US 70 as use number 4, which is commercial use. When the 2010 plan was developed, the city was suffering from sprawl in every direction. They adopted a very common sense plan to allow and encourage development, commercial development, where you have major intersections. Let it grow at these, they call them nodes. Let commercial grow at the nodes and restrict them along the thoroughfares. Well, if you look, Riceville Road is officially designated as a major thoroughfare. Goes on out to Warren Wilson College. US 70 is a major thoroughfare. What's right across the street from these intersection of major thoroughfares? Elf Auto Service. Everybody needs a neighborhood automobile service station, and that's what this is. Nothing larger could be built on the property. It's a neighborhood asset. If you look at your plan, you'll see that since the 2010 plan occurred, we had Rite Aid have a major development at one side of the intersection. If you look at the other side of the intersection, the VA Medical Center had a major expansion. The other side, Ingalls, had a major expansion. They had a fueling center there. And then next to it, McDonald's has had a major expansion. This is an was an underutilized site until the petitioner decided to improve it with a neighborhood service center.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Wow, who knew this would be our hottest topic of the evening?
I'll be brief. Everybody's already stole my thunder anyway. Gary Davis, Davis Civil Solutions. We're the civil engineer on site. Just two issues I'll bring up. One is, this already both have been talked about. You asked a question about the slope on the side from the back right rear. It's about 8 feet. It tapers toward the front, so there's no way to access off that side road to the east. There is an existing driveway on the west that you saw in the rear there. Big issue, two issues on the location of the building is there is a 20-foot MSD easement in the front. Of course, they don't allow any building on top of their easement, so it's pushed back as far as it could. There are there was one storm drain line on the east street there that spilled out on the property and went under it. In the excavation of trying to lower that to accommodate footings, we found another city-owned storm drain in a location that we weren't aware of, so we had to put two under the building and lowering it. The biggest issue we looked at in the location of the building had more to do with congestion. If someone's coming in off of Tunnel Road, if someone's coming out, trying to leave at the same time, a truck's coming in, hauling a car, you're going to back everybody up on Tunnel Road. So the idea would be if you're trying to go, you'd allow people to go through the building to drop off their car and then turn around and come back out. But unfortunately, 15 feet is not enough width for a tow truck to come through the building and then make their turn around without, encroaching into the slope in the back. The same way coming in the side street, trying to come in, there's no way you can make that radius in 15 feet trying to pull it into the building. Those are really the only issues that have been addressed or have been, but more emphasis on those. If there's any technical questions, I can answer those if you need be. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I believe you have a motion.
I move to approve the conditional zoning request for Elf Auto Center for the property located at 1093 Tunnel Road and 318 Park Place from Highway Business and Residential Single Family High Density District to Highway Business Conditional Zone District, and find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, and is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted plans, in that the proposal makes use of an existing commercial parcel with upgrades to site landscaping, and the landscape buffer will provide an effective screen between the use and the neighborhood.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions, comments? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that concludes our public hearings agenda. Thank you. We have one item of unfinished business, and Assistant City Manager Jay Dundas is here to talk to us about the River Arts District Transportation Improvement Project, RADTIP.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Jay Dundas, Interim Assistant City Manager. Today, we are seeking council action on 3 items, all of them related to the River Arts District Transportation Improvement Project, also known as Tiger 6. Just a little bit of background, in May of 2017, we bid this project, and because bid prices came in over the available budget, we had to evaluate the project and identify some parts of the project. It was a big suite of projects. Had to identify some savings and postpone a few of the project elements. Among those were greenways, but also we negotiated with the contractor who bid the project, who helped the Beverly Grant Barnhill, who helped us bid the project, the construction manager at risk. Pricing for the the postponement of Lyman Street infrastructure, which included the reconstruction of Lyman Street, dedicated bike lane along Lyman Street, and the sidewalk on the land on the opposite side of the river from Lyman Street. The negotiation of that price of the postponement of those projects was in the neighborhood of $4.6 million. The intent of postponing those projects is that they could be put into future budgets, and that at some point in the future we were committed to build those projects out. So moving forward through the budget development, capital budget development, we were considering those projects, but we were pleasantly surprised by the Buncombe County Tourism Development Authority when they came to us and offered $4.6 million because of the benefits of completing that infrastructure in that area to tourism and the businesses in that area as well. So they offered that money graciously, and so the first 2 items are to accept that money as a grant. They are funding partners in this project already. This helps to complete the Lyman Street improvements much sooner than we would anticipate last summer when we awarded the contract. And then the second item is to amend the budget to include those funds for the construction of the infrastructure improvements into this River Arts RADTIP Tiger 6 budget. The third item that we're seeking authorization for is to amend the contract with Beverly Grant Barnhill in the amount of the grant award of $4.6 million. To include, to add back the infrastructure improvements that were removed from the original contract award. This was an actual line item in the when we were brought it to council in June, late June of 2017. This line item was identified as a negotiated price for removal from those bids which we had received in May. So we're here today to seek approval to amend that contract, add this money back. We have met with the contractors, and they have confirmed that they can complete the work for the amount. They have gone back to their subcontractors, and the subcontractors have gone back to the suppliers and confirmed that they can hold the prices that they had received in May, and that they're able to complete the work for this $4.6 million. We would, after authorization of this revision to the contract, the work on this area will begin relatively quickly. One of the other added benefits of completing the work right now is that we don't have to cause repeated disruptions to the businesses in that area and to traffic. We did present to council. There are other options with this. We feel, as the staff recommendations show, that we feel like this is the most efficient and way to include to complete the work, and the most least disruptive to the business and traveling community or public in that area. There are other options, though. We could, in fact, rebid this work through a separate, just as a separate project altogether. The complications associated with that, the risks are that we don't know pricing. We have had experienced over the last several years increasing pricing. We have $4.6 million is guaranteed. That's what the cost of labor materials for this work. We don't know what it would cost if we went out onto the market again. Additionally, if we were to bid this as a separate project, you would have two contractors in the same area. That's always complicated. It's sometimes a scheduling issue. You may have separate work schedules. You have a lot of things happening in a small area right now. The construction manager at risk methodology that we're using allows that construction manager to schedule all of the disciplines in that area, and so they're coordinated and hopefully most efficient in trying to be least disruptive to the public. Additionally, we could have the CMAR to rebid this project under their current contract, which is they bid all of the projects originally last May. We could ask them to rebid. Again, the pricing is the risk there. We are not sure what we would get for pricing, and then that would essentially eliminate the risk of scheduling, because they would be responsible for that. But again, given the risks of increased pricing and the complications with scheduling, we do recommend that this be just added back to the contract as it was removed in the original award in June. I'd have to answer any questions.
Okay. Anyone have any questions for Jay?
So it's going to come in under the CMAR structure, right? So this is going to be a guarantee. This is a guaranteed price.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, I'll take public comment for all three of the motions, or any public comment? Okay, but so I'm going to close the public comment, and we'll need a vote on each of the various resolutions. So Keith?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it.
Actually, before we do that, can I just make a comment? Many of you know that I am the council liaison to the TDA, and it is the TDA's grant of $4.6 million that is enabling us to even have this conversation and move forward with this really important part of this project that we were all tremendously disappointed to think that we might have lost just a few months ago. So I want to say a big, hearty thank you to the TDA board. This was, and I think it's important to note that the city did not ask the TDA for this money. The TDA made this decision on their own. Looking at the need, they had already invested a lot in the RAD tip, and saw this as a big loss for the project, and decided on their own to use the money that was actually almost exactly this amount that was left over in the TPDF fund to fund this project. And So I think that they deserve a big thank you for that. And just also want to add that with that addition, I don't have quite the latest numbers, but by my total, with this addition, it brings the investments by the TDA into either city projects or city-owned facilities to well over $23 million, which is close to, it's somewhere between probably 80 and 85% of the money that has been granted out of the TPDF. So it's a popular narrative that the city of Asheville doesn't benefit from the occupancy tax, that we don't get anything from that, city residents don't get anything from that, and I just want to take the opportunity to say that in fact we've gotten about 80 to 85% of the funds that have come in into the TPDF and for city-owned facilities or city projects. And this is, I don't know if this is the largest one, but it's certainly pretty spectacular. So just want to say thank you.
So we've got 3 items under this agenda item, and based on the wording that's in the staff report, I'm going to try to take a crack at 1 and 2 and then make a separate motion for 3. So I move that the Asheville City Council adopt a resolution accepting a grant from the Buncombe County Tourism Development Authority in the amount of $4.6 million to complete construction of the work on Lyman Street in the River Arch District, and 2, a budget amendment in the amount of $4.6 million to appropriate this funding.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone wishing to comment on the motion?
I already took public comment.
Are you, well, it's not on our public hearings agenda.
Oh,
All right.
I asked for it, but
Okay.
no one
All right.
commented.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed?
And then the third one. Sorry.
Oh, you, okay.
So those were the first 2. This is the last one. I recommend that, I make a motion that Asheville City Council authorize the city manager to execute a contract amendment in the amount of $4.6 million with Beverly Grant Barnhill to complete construction of roadway improvements, a protected bike lane, and a sidewalk along Lyman Street.
Second.
Sorry. Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. I assume we did all that, right? Oh, good. All right, that concludes our printed agenda. We're adding one item of new business under our agenda tonight regarding a transportation issue that's come up. And I don't know, Julie or Gwen, you want to talk about it?
I'll start then. Yeah. So on the NCDOT is looking at 2 intersections along Merriman Avenue, W.T. Weaver and Edgewood, and I have to admit that I voted as a part of the MPO for an improvement to those intersections, and that was the entire description of the project. About a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago, NCDOT held a public forum to explain what their plans were. I attended that with several members of City Council also, and there was a large gathering of the public who came out. And I suspect the majority of council was really disappointed in the fact that there was a very detailed plan put together with no input from city staff, no marrying up with the city's complete streets plans, with the AIM plan, with the bicycle and pedestrian plan.
The comp plan?
The comp plan, pretty much any plan. And apparently, there was actually a study that DOT performed several years ago that also wasn't looked at. There's a large footprint that the plan would call to take away from some of the neighborhoods, as well as to allow for more car action. And so what I would like, and I didn't hear anybody at that public forum supporting the DOT's plan, so I would ask that we we ask city staff to work closely with DOT to get this project consistent with all those various plans, to open the whole process back up to include more input from residents and people who live here in Asheville to, again, it's not a good plan, but even more importantly, to really ask DOT to change their policies and procedures so that nothing happens in Asheville like this, where DOT imposes a plan that without any input from our citizens or our city staff. That I would ask that they just need to really go back and back up and change their policies and procedures around this and really express our disappointment. I mean, I had felt like we were making good progress with DOT around the I-26 process. I felt like they really had opened up their minds to listen to our ideas and trying to be consistent with our plans. And this, what it looks like they're doing on Merriman Avenue, just feels to me like we lost a lot of ground. And I'm really disappointed, and I think other members of City Council are too. So I guess I would ask that the staff draft a resolution to something along those lines, that we communicate this formally to NCDOT, and that we make a plan on Merriman Avenue that's just much more consistent with what the city's vision of this corridor should be. Sorry, that's probably the longest I've ever spoken up here.
So I'll just echo everything that Gwen said and really want to put a point on the longer-term structural relationship between the city and DOT on these projects. I took a look at the approved STIP today, and there are 19 projects in the city of Asheville, road projects, urban road projects, that should not begin to be worked on without city staff and perhaps even some of our volunteer citizen leaders on the Multimodal Transportation Commission and some of our transportation advocates in town at the table working with DOT on these designs. These are our streets. I realize DOT may technically manage them, but they are our streets. They are the fabric of our city, and we are the ones who live with them every day. And we have to get that working relationship right for these 19 projects and all the ones that come after them, starting with the Merriman Avenue project. So.
Yeah, I would echo what you all have said. I've lived near this area for a long time, but more broadly, I knew in theory that this project was on the list. I didn't realize it had risen to the top of the list, and I certainly wasn't aware, like everybody else, that anyone was drafting a plan for it. So I think it's obviously going to be more effective and work better for DOT to engage the community on the front end and work with the community coming up with a draft plan instead of doing it this way, which just seems to involve a lot of work and then a complete reset. So hopefully we can get this right going forward. We have heard from a lot of folks that have emailed us about this and are very eager to give their input. Number one, I would say to those folks, please email us, that is fine, but also make sure you either copy or also send a copy of your comments to the DOT, because they will receive the comments. I've tried to direct people where to do that, but it's a little bit confusing. And then what I know that we have a comment deadline for the DOT, but maybe you can address council's desire to weigh in on this and allow folks to come talk to us about it in that comment period.
Yes, Ken Putnam, the Transportation Department Director. Yes, the deadline that they've set for the public comment is January 21st. So from a staff standpoint, we're proceeding with our process.
Like January 21st, that already happened?
2 days ago? January 29th.
So next week.
Next week. I got ahead of myself.
But nevertheless, a short comment period.
It's a short time frame. So we're proceeding to supply all those comments on that due date, and we go to the Multimodal Transportation Commission tomorrow to share it with them and to get their input with our comments. Now, I've confirmed with the DOT, though, that if City Council chooses to consider a resolution at a later date, and they pass that resolution, they will accept it. The deadline for January 29th is not.
So can we set it
concerning
for
that.
the first meeting in February? All right. Okay, thanks, Ken.
And I will also just say that I had a conversation with Billy Clark, who's this region's representative on the Department of Transportation Board, that we were going to have this conversation tonight, so we're not blindsiding DOT with our concerns or with the concerns of the community. I think they're well aware of them, and we've done our due diligence to let our board member know, and he was communicating that back to local DOT staff.
Okay, so we don't need to take a vote on anything tonight, just the sort of a planning discussion. All right.
I think there may be people here, but maybe they can speak in the next section.
Yeah, I know there are some people here, and instead of getting into that tonight, let's hear all the comments at the next meeting of council when we consider this. Thanks. Okay, so that concludes our printed agenda and our not printed agenda, as it were. And I've got two people signed up to speak. The first is Journey. And Journey, you're going to have to help me with your last name. So you get three minutes to speak, and so feel free. If you'll just hear your last name.
Thank you. My name is Journey Pfifferling. I live in West Asheville. I wanted to share an opinion in regards to the subject that has been bouncing around for a while, short-term rentals. And my opinion is there can be a win-win on both sides, but I really want to share the opinion that I wish, and it may be just my ignorance, so this opinion could turn into a question. In regards to the details about the lowest, let me share the story. I'm sorry, this is not clear, but I realize I have 3 minutes. I live on Morningside Drive, and my mother owns the house, and I'm lucky to live there. A couple months ago, my friend called me up and said, hey, I'm not able to stay where I'm living right now, and I really need a place to crash for 1 or 2 weeks. Can I come crash at your house? And I told her, yeah, that sounds good, and maybe you'd consider between your time here, $100 a week, either cash or work trade for the time that you have crashed for 1 to 2 weeks. And that worked out between the two of us. Then I come to find out that that's illegal. And if there was ever any problem and the city got involved, I could be charged $500 per night for a short-term rental in my mother's house to have a friend stay over and potentially help clean my house for 1 or 2 weeks. I just felt that triggered me to come and share the opinion. I understand that certain places, short-term rentals are inappropriate, but I wanted to highlight my story that I just told you because it's such a, I know there's a homestay permit that I could get that would cost $200, I believe, but the issue is for my friend to stay for 1 week. She probably would have cleaned my house a little bit, not paid me anything. And I just wanted to reaffirm that at the very least, please respect homeowners' rights to have people stay for free, and then if possible, reconsider when it's such a small amount, $100 per week or something like that. You give a lot of permission to hotels and people with big business to, sell nightly stays, et cetera, but I think it's really unfair for homeowners for the city to encroach on a homeowner's right to exchange goods and services in their own home, be taxed for that. when it's such a small amount, I know people could say, you can get away with it on the table. Well, the point is I wanted to bring it before you because I don't want to have to get away with it on the table. I want to obey the law, and if it's the details are fine-tuned, that would be great. And if it's my ignorance, maybe somebody could address that. Thank you.
Thank you. No, all right, okay. What I would say is I would just encourage you to contact city staff or look at our website. There's a lot of information on there about how that works. The next person I have signed up to speak is Mr. Thibodeau.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council, and City Manager. It's kind of funny that tonight when I come in here, there's one part about this RAD. You know, they're talking about all this extra money that it's costing us because contractors don't want to work in the city. And then the second thing is the North Carolina Department of Transportation comes along and says they don't want to work with the city. They're just going to go ahead and plan themselves. That wasn't a part of my presentation, but I'm just saying that was kind of, odd. Tonight, we recognize that many city employees are hardworking, loyal, and sincere, and we wish to acknowledge them and give thanks with our sincerest appreciation. While I was employed by the city in 2012, I was called into a meeting where I was surrounded by several supervisors. Afterwards, they made a statement about my actions during the meeting. After I learned of this statement, I produced hard evidence that clearly proved the untruthfulness of their statement. In fact, the city manager agreed with me and removed that statement. At the last city council meeting, I informed you of the lack of impartiality by one of the city staff. One of the then supervisors. You see, this lack of impartiality I spoke of was not the first time Shannon Tuck tried to use her power and arrogance to inflict pain and intimidation against me. The city manager knew of this conduct then and now, and yet he refuses to acknowledge this as unprofessional conduct.
Please direct your comments to us.
He continues to propagate this hateful culture of prejudice, arrogance, and parochialism that is directed towards other staff, the voting public, taxpayers, and contractors. I seen this today and I was just amazed at it. I read this performance audit report, payroll and benefits, April 18, 2017. That was less than a year ago. It says, and I quote, "We noted that there appears to be a large amount of overtime and compensatory time earned in the city. In addition to the high amount citywide, a disproportionately high amount of overtime and compensatory time is earned by a small group of employees and departments within the city." That speaks large. What message are you...
Thank you. You can submit your comments to the clerk and she'll pass them around if you wish. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? All right, if not, we have a closed session motion.
I move that the Asheville City Council go into closed session for the following reasons: to prevent disclosure of information that is privileged and confidential, pursuant to laws of North Carolina, are not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes. The law that makes information privileged and confidential in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318, 10A3. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318, 11A1. Also, to establish or to instruct the city staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the city in negotiating the terms of a contract for an acquisition, of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318-11A5. Also, to continue, the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, and conditions of appointment of an individual public officer or employee. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318-11A6, and to prevent the disclosure of information that is confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 360A through 168, the Personnel Privacy Act. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318-11A1. Lastly, to discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industry, the statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318-11A4.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?